Hey friends, it's Jasmine, and I hope that you all are doing well. For those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. This is primarily an occult witchcraft channel where I vlog about my own personal experiences in the craft as a practicing witch for the better half of a decade and as a high priestess of the Solar Court Coven. Make sure that you give this video a thumbs up, a like, subscribe to my channel, and enjoy the ride. Today, what I want to talk about is the Gospel of Aradia. The Gospel of Aradia, in my opinion, is very much an occult literary classic. It is definitely a book, a text, a tome that if you are not familiar with, it would be in your best interest to familiarize yourself with it. And the reason being is this book, and I'm going to link this below in the description bar so that way you can also get the same copy that I have. I think that this book for many witches is a book of empowerment, liberation, feminism, anti-capitalism, anti-establishment. But it's a very controversial book, and when you are going to be in occult or craft-based spaces, this book may be referenced, and the Gospel of Aradia may be acknowledged. And I think that as a witch, and looking at the, the pillars of our craft as far as to know, to will, to dare, to keep silent, if we're thinking about this in terms of an OTO sort of sense, to know, first of all, means to know your craft. Now, to know doesn't just mean to know yourself and to know your own craft, but to also know your shit, okay? So whether you agree or disagree with this book, that is part of your to know as a witch. And when I say to know, I mean your learning, your seeker aspect as a witch. This book by Charles Leland, okay, is Aradia, the Gospel of the Witches. And here's what it looks like, okay? This is the copy that I have. However, there are definitely older copies than this. And this book, supposedly, allegedly, is where the Stregoneria, or the Strega, the Italian witchcraft tradition, really originated from. So this is why I'm saying it's important to do your research, and it's important to do your homework, and it's important to read up on stuff that may or may not be your path, and that may or may not be your practice. Because as a witch, our education and our understanding is the key to our power. The more we know, the more we understand, the more power then we possess. And I personally believe that everything in life, there are things that we take from it that can help us. But even if we disagree with certain things from texts or from tomes, that also gives us something. And that gives us this gift of disagreement, because it's okay to not agree. And it's okay to look at a tome and be like, this is why I don't agree with this, and this is why this doesn't make sense, and this is why it doesn't resonate. But until you open the book and acknowledge those things, it's not going to come to you. So yes, regardless of what type of craft you practice, in my opinion, the Gospel of Aradia is an occult classic that would be in your best interest to at least read through once. So talking about why this book is so controversial, that is because this is considered to be a gospel. Gospel meaning good news, right? And it's controversial for several reasons. One, because it kind of blends Roman paganism and Italian Catholicism together. And that is very much the Strega tradition. And this book is where the Strega tradition comes from, okay? From Aradia, from Aradia. This book is also controversial because the tome and the text supports this as fact, meaning that Aradia was a real flesh and blood mortal woman who walked this earth. Not everyone necessarily looks at this the same way. I think that with other holy texts or tomes, you have people who look at things from a fundamentalist level, where they take word for word exactly from the book, and they believe that. And then you also have the aspect of metaphors, to where in this book, you have metaphors. So you read line by line and you kind of decode and pick apart the meanings of each line in this book. The reason why I think that this should be very much on your witchy reading list is because this is how a tradition of the craft came to be. This is the Strega tradition. This is how it originated. I think it's important to acknowledge that and to read up on that. Also, I think that the figure of Aradia herself, whether you believe Aradia to be a living mortal who walked this earth, or whether you look at Aradia as the prophetess, more as an archetype, as a prophetess of the goddess and of the craft, either way, it's very much an empowering message. This book is all about liberation, empowerment, freedom, and that is very much what Aradia preached and teached, okay, is basically teaching the poor witchcraft, herbalism, and the art of poison in order to free themselves from capitalism and liberate themselves from their greedy lords. So like I said, whether you read this story and take it as literal or take it as metaphorical and figurative, the tome still holds power. There is power in belief and there is power in archetypes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And do not let anyone tell you differently. I personally find the legend of Aradia to be one of liberation, one of empowerment, one of taking the chains and the shackles off, one of, dismantling the patriarchy, if you will. Some of the verses in this book are dated, and some of the verses in this book do come off differently than they would if it was a witch in 2021 speaking about this text. So do keep that in mind and know that everything written within this book, word for word, line for line, is very much a riddle, is very much said in Old English. So you do have to take the time to really decipher what you believe the message is about the gospel. This is not a book that you are going to read from start to finish in an evening. I mean, you can. I think that this book is 150 pages? Let me see. 178 pages. So you could very easily read this start to finish in a day, or at least I could. I mean, I devour books. However, I would encourage you to read this one chapter a day or one chapter a week. I would not do this, just run through it, because you're going to miss some of the delicious metaphors that are held within Aradia's gospel. So I will be making probably some more videos about the Gospel of Aradia and talking more about how I feel about some of the Gospels, some of the chapters, talking about some of the invocations. That'll probably be over on Patreon, at least for now. But I encourage you all to check this book out for yourself. And I am going to be rereading this book, the Gospel of Aradia, because I'm familiar with the story. I mean, basically, in a nutshell, Aradia comes down to earth, born of Lucifer and a goddess. Who that goddess is always questionable. I mean, they use the name Diana, but there's a lot of speculation that Aradia's mother could be Diana, but also could be Lilith, but also could be Hecate. So I think you kind of have to do your own sort of investigation there on who you believe Aradia's mother is, but in every story, Aradia's father is always Lucifer. And there's a lot of Catholic and Roman pagan and Luciferian themes to the story. And if you're familiar with the story of Sabrina, the teenage witch, that I'm sure many of you might have seen on Netflix, then you're probably already somewhat familiar with the story of Aradia, because they very much kind of mirror each other. And I'm going to be kind of picking this book apart over on Patreon. But I just wanted to encourage you all to check this book out. So yes, check out the book, look into Aradia. I will link this down below with the rest of my links for Patreon, Facebook, Instagram, all of that. And until next time, blessed be.